Next item is the hearings panel report to the council on the proposed replacement alcohol restrictions in public places 2018. Councillor David East, chairperson. I'll hand over to you, David.
Thank you. The bylaw considers alcohol bans in 15 areas in the city. 2 of those areas were existing as temporary. So there's no change to the actual number or the areas under consideration. Linwood was a temporary alcohol ban, as was parts of the Riccarton racecourse area. They were temporary, so they're now being incorporated as permanent bans. There is an introduction for a clause in the bylaw to consider temporary alcohol bans for large events, particularly on Hagley Park and Rafiti and Thompson Parks, and the introduction of some minor changes to the Riccarton Island alcohol ban area, which just reflects recognition more of the school, and Jelly Park, the roading on both sides of the park. The Addington area was the subject of quite some debate in the panel, the hearings panel, where people actually asked us to consider a permanent alcohol ban 24/7, 52 weeks of the year for the Addington area. It wasn't an item that was consulted upon, so we didn't have the jurisdiction to actually consider that further. It may be an item that comes up in the future for further consideration. The other part of the hearings panel, we heard some submissions from a number of sporting groups, particularly rugby league, who wanted to explore options for alcohol-free restrictions on a number of sporting grounds around the city, and again, that's an item that staff are investigating further to be considered at a later date. So in summary then, we have 15 alcohol areas. There's no increase in the number of alcohol areas, just some minor changes to a couple of them, and the introduction of the clause for large events. So I'm happy to move the report as it's presented to you today.
Are you happy to second? Yep. Is there any you'd like to speak to it? Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I totally support the Linwood Village alcohol ban going permanent. There's been quite a marked change in the behaviour in Linwood Village since the temporary one was established, and this was a community-led initiative to get that happening into the Linwood Village. There's a lot of other social issues that we need to address in the immediate area, but this has had quite an impact on some of the antisocial behaviour there. So there's still a lot of work to do, but this has made a difference, and I hope it's goes forward to being permanent.
Yanni?
Wondered if the hearing panel had considered, in particular regards to the Linwood Village one, which I support, and Councillor Swiggs has raised, that there was a lot of community support for it, although there has been a group and some individuals that have concerns. Did you consider producing some guidelines around enforcement? Because previously, I think what we've heard is people were concerned about how it would be enforced, and I just wondered whether the panel had any discussion around just putting in place some guidelines so that those concerns could be addressed.
Not specifically, but it is always a concern of mine with all our bylaws and the enforcement area that there is a huge amount of work that our enforcement staff are required to engage with bylaws, with resource consents, and really it's fair to say I think they're probably a little under-resourced, and we struggle to probably give the most effective treatment to a lot of our enforcement issues, but no, we didn't really sort of go into that detail.
I don't know if we're able to make a resolution, so just...
The bylaw enables the police to enforce. And this is what's happened in Linwood Village. It's actually enabled them to actually take action, not the council.
I totally understand that. As someone that's been involved in alcohol bans for a long time, I've seen what other cities have done, like Nelson, for example, worked with the youth council to come up with some really, simple, clear, easy to understand information in conjunction with the youth council to ensure that people felt that, their rights weren't being abused, but it was perfectly reasonable for people to enforce it. But there are ways of doing it, which means that people are aware of it, because one of the criticisms we had previously at this council table was that maybe some people in Linwood Village that actually weren't aware of the fact that it was a ban and that they were possibly being faced with having enforcement action taken. So I just think in terms of a moral responsibility, actually making sure people understand that there's an alcohol ban and having guidelines around with the police how it's enforced. My understanding from the police previously is that they do take, a very... not a soft approach, but they actually try and encourage people to understand. They take a very reasonable approach. I've been out with them at
night. They're very, very good.
So just having that kind of documented, I can't see what the harm would be.
Sure, our staff do engage with a number of agencies that are working in the area as well. So there is that sort of educative approach to what's happening. But in terms of enforcement staff actually out there doing, that sort of work.
Through the chair, can I make a comment?
Yes, I'd like to invite the Chief Executive to respond to that.
Thank you. I think it's a really important point that enforcement is one of the roles, but it's actually about being much more proactive and engaging communities and people around these issues. And so the actual enforcement is at one end, but there's a whole range of other things that I know that enforcement staff would like to do in terms of focusing on supporting communities in different ways. And so I take Councillor East's comments. There've been more and more bylaws or things that we need to enforce and that we really do need to think about, so how do we do that in the best way and how do we resource those functions as well?
So, Phil.
Just want to make a comment in relation to this, if I may. Like David had referred to the Addington Village part that they hadn't been consulted on. And I just wanted to really underline that the community board's view was that they hadn't seen sufficient evidence to actually support it. And I think that in future it's important that all of the information comes to the community boards so they have the facts too, because this is quite a serious step to take for an alcohol ban, and the boards didn't want to make that lightly in terms of their support for it.
But it wasn't. It was deemed to be out of order too.
Correct, but it's important we get,
which would make it out of order
right
here as well. Just so. All right, Anne.
Yes, I'd just like to support what Phil said earlier about informing...
You didn't hear what I said.
Sorry. Informing community boards, particularly as they make these decisions.
It has to go through due process.
Yes.
And that's why this committee actually did go through due process, which is that they said that they couldn't make the decision.
Yes, understand that.
Yes, which
going forward, I think that it would be, it will come back to them, won't it?
It'll go back to the community board,
and that's where I think the evidence must be given, the education must happen so that they can make a decision. Because for me it seems, as we've endorsed just recently our Christchurch Alcohol Action Plan, this is one way that communities can make a stand against the huge harm that alcohol's doing in the community, and it's a wee bit bewildering to have a community board that is actually making opposition, standing in opposition against this. So it would be great to see that's going to happen. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so we have a resolution moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much.